is Mandira. Welcome to AglaSem, and today we are going to study Class 11, Chapter 7, Human Memory. So in this chapter, we are going to study about how we memorize stuff. जो भी चीजें आपको इस क्लास में पढ़ाई जाती हैं, whether you are most likely to remember it in your exam or not. So the different processes involved in memory, different stages involved in memory, and in the end, they also give a few tips on how to improve memory. So stay tuned if you have any kind of problem memorizing these chapters, because this is literally the science of dealing with remembering things. Okay, so let's start with the first main heading, which is the nature of memory. So what is memory? Memory refers to retaining and recalling information over a period of time, depending upon the nature of cognitive task you are required to perform. So it is also given that it comes from, it's not given here, but it does come from a Latin word. But what does memory exactly mean? इसका मतलब ये retaining and recalling. That means basically making the information stay in your head and also being able to recall it. So being able to bring it back to your awareness whenever it is desired. Okay. So now this is not just in context of a chapter learning. It's not just in context of remembering a certain term. It can also be in the context of remembering how to do things. Like remembering how to ride a bicycle, how to drive a car, remembering how to, mathematically do calculations. All those things basically require storing information and retrieving information, right? So let's get into it and come to the stages of memory, because abhi main ye terms aise hi casually use kar rahi hu, but these are professional terms that are given in NCERT. So let's get on to the first stage of memory. The first stage is encoding. What does that mean? It refers to the process by which information is recorded and registered for the first time so that it becomes usable by our memory system. Now, if you are doing this chapter for the first time, or whatever, content is there in this chapter, aap usko first time sun rahe ho, then that means the process of encoding is going on in your mind. It means whatever new information is coming to you, you are trying to sort of register it and code it in your head. Okay. So it is a very important process, because first time aap kuch, if you listen to something, it is very important that it is heard clearly, it is heard in the right way, and you hear the right kind of content, right? So for example, if someone misexplains a concept to you, then the first time the concept was explained to you will be entered incorrectly. So it will be very difficult to, kind of renew it. फिर आपको उसको जाके mentally correct करना पड़ेगा. That the first time I heard it wrong. Okay. So the next stage is the second stage, which is the storage stage. So information which is encoded must also be stored so that it can be put to use later on. So आप कोई चीज आपने सुन ली, but you want to be able to store it in your mind, right? Because only if it is stored correctly, you will be able to recall it later on. So again, this is a very important stage. And the final stage is retrieval. Retrieval matlab information that can be used anywhere when one is able to recover it from his memory and bring it back to awareness. Okay, now जब भी कोई भी memory failure होता है, for example, you are in the exam and you know that you have read the concept, encoding ठीक हुई थी, probably storage भी शायद ठीक हुई थी, but you are not able to recall it. Okay, so mostly whenever something goes wrong in memory, it is due to the retrieval. You are not receiving enough cues, or or it can also be because it was not stored in the enough stage. So mostly it is due to retrieval, but all three stages are very important. So if it is encoded wrong, or not stored appropriately, or it is not stored deep enough into the brain, and thirdly, if you don't have enough cues, or you are not able to recall it, उस time आपको याद नहीं आ रहा है that आपने किस reference से उसको याद किया था. All these three stages any kind of failure in these three stages can lead to a failure in recall. Okay, failure in retrieval of memory, or failure in any kind of process involved with memory. Okay, so in retrieval also, it's given that it can be used for performing various cognitive tasks such as problem solving and decision making. As I said before, it is not just learning up terms and mugging up chapters. It is also involved in processes. It is also involved in different kind of tasks that we perform. Okay. So let's come to the next main heading, which is information processing approach and the stage model. Now, initially what they thought was that basically memory is the capacity to store our information that we require through learning and experience, right? It was seen that it was like a vast storehouse kind of thing. But जैसे कि computer में, a lot of people make this analogy that just like data is stored in a computer, जो information हमारे आसपास है, whatever data is surrounding us will be stored in our brain or will be stored in our mind. Okay, so human memory started to be seen as a similar kind of system. So if you've worked in the, if you've worked with any kind of computers or आपके पास phone है, then you always know there is the RAM, that is the random access memory, which is supposed to be a bit smaller, and then there is the hard disk. ठीक है, for example 8 GB RAM है या फिर आपकी 16 GB RAM है, but the hard disk will be much bigger, like 512 GB, 1 terabyte. तो इसमें क्या है कि जो आपकी 8 GB वाली random access memory है, उसको आप you can kind of understand it. It is kind of akin to the short term memory, and the 512 वाला जो आपका proper hard disk वाला memory है, that is your long term memory. Okay, so this is the computer analogy that was made. So this analogy led to the development of the first model of memory, which was proposed by Atkinson and Shiffrin in 1968, and it is known as the stage model. Okay, so how this computer analogy is right and wrong, we will discuss in the coming aspects of this chapter, so stay tuned. Let's move on to the next main heading, which is memory systems: sensory, short term and long term. These are the terms that I was using right now. So according to the stage models proposed by ये जो computer analogy से derive हुआ model है, according to that model there are 3 stages in memory systems: the sensory memory, the short term memory and the long term memory. Okay, so let's first do the sensory memory. Okay, so the incoming information first enters through sensory memory, and it has a large capacity, however a very 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 short duration. For example, अगर कोई भी चीज आप स्मेल करते हो तो उस स्मेल की मेमोरी, या फिर अगर आप कोई भी चीज टच करते हो या कोई भी चीज रीड करते हो, so first of all you are reading it using your sense organs. If I'm reading this chapter, I'm reading it using my eyes. Okay, so that is हमारा जो फर्स्ट मेमोरी के से जो इनटेक है, that is using a sensory organ. Okay, so this system is referred to as the sensory memories or sensory registers, because all the information is registered through the senses and is the exact replica of the stimulus. Exactly like इस book में exactly जैसे ये wordings लिखे हैं, I am reading them copy to copy. It's not manipulating any kind of information. So sensory organ आप समझ लीजिए, it's just like kind of a mirror. So whatever is coming to you, if it's a pin that's poking you, or if you are reading a chapter or anything else, it will completely mirror it back. ठीक है? So next we move on to short term memory. Short term memory क्या होती है? Basically information that is attended to enter the second memory store is called the short term memory or STM, which holds a small amount of information for a brief amount of time. तो sensory memory में large amount of information can be stored, but only for very very brief amount of time. In short memory, small amount of information can be stored, also for a small amount of time. मतलब 30 seconds or so. So I think अच्छा इसमें given है, आगे given एक example है that there is this number called 194719291924, right? आपको उसको ऐसे याद करना है. So if you immediately look at that number, it will get stored in your short term memory. So you will be able to remember it for 30 seconds or so. उससे आगे अगर आपको उसको remember करना है, then we have to put in a lot of efforts. Okay. Now just remember that this area of the brain is different from the area of the brain that involves long term memory. Okay. So basically in terms of sound and in terms of any kind of stimulus, unless it is rehearsed again and again, unless you keep you make a lot of effort to make it enter your long-term memory, it will be stored only for 30 seconds. Now, long-term memory mein there is this area of the brain called hippocampus that is associated with it, not given in the NCERT, just for your knowledge. So that area of the brain is involved in long-term memory. Long-term memory kya hota hai? LTM. It is the permanent storehouse of all information that may be as recent as you want, as you ate breakfast yesterday, or as distant as when you celebrated your 6th birthday. So long-term memory is like that 512 GB wali, hard disk, that where you can store all the information. Aaj ki information se leke 10 saal purani information tak, any kind of information can be stored there. But in order to make any kind of information enter long-term memory, you have to put some kind of effort. Okay, and we will be discussing that. We will be discussing how all the science of how you can make information relatively permanently stored in your head. So अब क्या है, यहाँ पर एक बहुत important term आती है, control processes. So as an answer, so Atkinson and Shiffrin, जिन्होंने ये stage model propose किया है, who compared it to the computer analogy, basically introduced this term called control processes, which function to monitor the flow of information through various memory stores. मतलब LTM से STM में कौन सी इंफॉर्मेशन जाएगी, STM से LTM में कौन सी इंफॉर्मेशन जाएगी, कंट्रोल प्रोसेसेस होते हैं जो इसको इधर उधर से डायरेक्ट करते रहते हैं. ठीक है. Only the information which is attended to enters the STM. So ऐसा नहीं है कि all the information that is going around you will be in your short-term memory. No. I hope you remember the concept of selective attention that we did in chapter number 5. I think the sensory perception वाला जो हमारा chapter है, उसमें हमने बोला था selective attention means हमारे आसपास बहुत सारी चीजें हो रही हैं, but we will only attend to और pay attention to, एक focus जो हम करेंगे वो कम चीजों पे करेंगे. As I give you an example at that point also that, might be that when you're watching this video, your sibling is right next to you, on his phone, or your mom is cooking in the kitchen, your dad is working in the other room, but they are not getting your conscious attention. The only thing that, that is getting your conscious attention is this video. That is the concept of selective attention. Just a small recap. ठीक है? So, जिन चीजों पे हम अपनी selective attention पे कर रहे हैं, only those things will enter our short-term memory only. ठीक है? उसके बजाय short-term memory में भी enter नहीं कर सकता. The short-term memory then sets into motion another control process called maintenance rehearsal to retain information for as much time as required. Maintenance rehearsal. अच्छा, इसका एक simple सा example मैं आपको देती हूँ. For example, कभी किसी का call आता है and they are like, अच्छा एक number note कीजिए, okay? And you don't happen to have a pen around or a notebook around, and they are like 9818, and they are like, okay, 9818, and then 689524. So you will keep saying that phone number again and again, 9818, 689924. ये जो है, ये जो आप बार-बार उसको बोल रहे हो, this is an attempt to make it, stored in your long-term memory, or basically just to remember it for as long as you can. So इसको कहते हैं maintenance rehearsal. ठीक है? It is to simply maintain information through repetition, and when such repetitions discontinue, the information is lost. So it is an attempt, but long-term memory में जाने के लिए you have to put a lot more effort. So it doesn't go into the long-term memory. When you keep repeating for like 2-3 times अगर आप repeat करोगे, तो वो चीज जरूरी नहीं है कि long-term memory में जाए. So maybe you will remember that जब तक आपको पेन या पेंसिल नहीं मिल जाता, you will remember that phone number. But after you write it down, अगर मैं आपसे 2 घंटे बाद वो same phone number पूछूं, so probably you won't remember it. So that's because the repetition and the maintenance rehearsal only secures information into the short-term memory, yeah, only for a short duration of time. Okay. Then there is this process called chunking. Through chunking, it is possible to expand the capacity of the STM, which is otherwise 7 plus minus 2. For example, if you are told to remember a string of digits, जैसे कि मैंने आपको बताया था, it is an example that's given here, 1947, 1947, 1949, 2004. अगर आपको ये number याद करना है, you can remember it as 1947, which was the year of independence, 1949, जहाँ पे Indian Constitution was adopted, and 2004, which was the year India was struck by tsunami. Okay, so you can remember it using certain kind of events. So unless you give the information any kind of meaning, it is not going to, probably be stored for a very long time. So techniques like chunking can be used, जिनके से आप ये चीजों को, break करके, you can, sort of, कैसे बोलूं, you can force store it into your short-term memory for a longer time. ठीक है? Now, from the STM, information enters the long-term memory through elaborative rehearsal. So, maintenance rehearsal में और elaborative rehearsal में क्या फर्क है? Maintenance rehearsal से short-term memory के अंदर ही आपकी information रहेगी, but maybe you can increase the duration by to a certain extent. But elaborative rehearsals is a process by which information in the short-term memory can enter the long-term memory, which is relatively permanent. Okay. So, as against maintenance rehearsals, which are carried through silent or vocal repetition. This rehearsal attempts to connect to be retained information to the already existing information in the long-term memory. For example, अगर आपको compassion word याद करना है या truth या benevolence, so you will try to somehow connect it to humanity. This is the example given in NCERT. I love this one. If you want another example, there are many examples. For example, if you want to remember any kind of abstract term, especially this memory comes into play there. कि अगर आपको कोई भी abstract term remember करनी है, जैसे कि motherhood or any kind of such term, you can always relate it back to certain words that will help you remember it in the future. Okay. Now, there were a lot of experiments that were carried out to test the stage model of the memory. ठीक है? While some experiments show that STM and LTM are indeed two separate memory stores, other evidences have questioned their distinctiveness. की मतलब whether STM and LTM are in fact different or not. ठीक है? तो वेल हम लोग अभी तो यही पढ़ रहे हैं दैट evidences show that information can also be coded semantically in the STM and acoustically in the LTM. मतलब meaning wise आप STM में कर सकते हैं acoustically and you can do it in LTM. But मतलब jury still out they are saying, but the point is that most probably they are separate parts because I'll tell you why. Yeah, exactly. Next the experiment comes on Chalice and Warrington. तो ये जो दो बंदे हैं इन्होंने 1970 में basically there was this man who was known as KF who met with an accident and उसका left side of the cerebral hemisphere damage हो गया. So it was found that उसका short term memory was seriously affected. Long term memory was not that affected. Have you seen Gajni? In that also उसकी short term memory होता है ना उसको disorder. तो उसमें उसका एक section of the memory is affected but long term memory is not affected, right? So he keeps taking pictures of people he meets कि भाई I need to remember this. I think he has retrograde amnesia, जिसमें he forgets past things of his life, past memories of his life, right? So whenever he starts as a blank slate. So I mean, if you study it from a biological perspective, from a brain perspective, then yes, they are two different parts of the brain. So we can say that STM and LTM can function differently. Okay, next we come to levels of processing. Now Craig and Lockhart 1972, this is one of those chapters where these names really matter because they have it is very I feel like this is a very nicely written chapter and एक theory को critique करके I mean you'll point out the flaws and then the next theory is cited, so if you can do remember the names. So basically Craig and Lockhart पे आ जाते हैं. The view of Craig and Lockhart suggests that processing of any information relates to the manner in which it is perceived, analyzed, and understood, which in turn determines the extent to which it will be eventually retained. कि कितना retain होगा वो depend करता है कि how it is perceived, how it is understood, and how it is analyzed. In what context you took the information and how. Okay. So they proposed this levels of processing model in which the first level हम discuss करते हैं फटाफट. One may analyze, for example, इसमें cat का example है, if I'm not wrong. Yes. So yeah. So they say that any incoming information is processed at more than one level. One may analyze it in terms of its physical structure or features. For example, one might attend to the shape of letters in the word cat. तो आप cat word को CAT, you can remember it at the most basic level. At the first level, you will remember it as, you know, the C is like this. A का physical property ऐसा है, T ऐसा है, you know, that is the thing. Next में, this is the first and the shallowest level of processing. Okay, so at an intermediate level, one might consider to attend to the phonetic sounds that are attached to the letters, and therefore the structural features are transformed into at least a meaningful word, say cat. So ऐसे जो उनके A का you know make है, T का make है, K C का make है, इसको that is the shallowest level. The next level when it comes, you're like, oh, it is how to pronounce this word. This is cat. Okay, so that's what the word is, cat. Now you know the sound of it, you know how to say it out loud. ठीक है? So even in this, if you have any kind of you know कोई भी word है आपका, कोई new word आप सीख रहे हो and you remember it in terms of the you know shapes of the letters or you remember it in terms of how it is said, it is more likely to decay. इतना ज़्यादा नहीं चलेगा. Okay, you will not be remembering it for a very long time. However, at the third and deepest level in which information can be processed, it is the deepest level. So that ensures that the information is retained for a longer time. It is important that it gets analyzed and understood in terms of its meaning. So now if you know that cat का मतलब होता है बिल्ली and an image of a cat pops into your head, or you know that it's a furry animal, you know that it has 4 legs, you know that it purrs. So all these kind of things, when they come into the picture, you are more likely to remember what a cat is if you are at that last level of processing, at the deepest level of stage 3 of processing. ठीक है? So now let's move on to the next main heading, which is types of long-term memory. Okay? So types of long-term memory में क्या है कि there are 4 different kinds of basically there are 2 types, but उन दोनों में 2 subtypes हैं. So the first type we are going to do is declarative versus procedural. ठीक है? So one major classification is that of declarative and procedural. All the information pertaining to facts, names such as you know, a rickshaw has 3 or dates, rickshaw has 3 wheels, India became independent on 15th August, or a frog is an amphibian. All these kind of things are more likely to be stored in your declarative memory. Declarative मतलब आप समझ लो ऐसे, यू कैन रिमेंबर इट लाइक दैट कि जिस चीज की डेक्लेरेशन दे दी गई है, सो इट इज अ फैक्ट, डिक्लेयर कर दिया, ठीक है, डिक्लेयर कर दिया मतलब फैक्ट है. It is a fact that frog is an amphibian. It is a fact that humans are mammals, right? So this kind of factual memory or dates जो होती हैं कि उनका उसका India, when did India gain its independence or when is the Republic Day, it's on 26 January and so on. ठीक है, all these are part of the declarative memory. Procedural memory क्या होती है? Refers to memories relating to procedures for accomplishing various tasks and skills such as how to ride a bicycle, how to make tea or play basketball. मैंने आपको कहा था that memory is involved in a lot of processes. So procedural क्या होती है? जिसमें कोई भी आपको procedure follow करना है. It is as it is suggested by the name. So for example, bicycle पे बैठना है, so कौन सा पहले पैर रखना है, क्या करना है ना? All these kind of things. This is part of a procedure. या car drive करना. How to first you have to make sure it's in neutral, you have to start the car and you have to put on your seat belt, you have to release the handbrake. All this is part of a procedure, so it will be part of the procedural memory. Now the second kind of classification proposed by Turing is that of episodic and semantic memory. Episodic memory is the easiest one to remember. It is basically biographical details of your lives. So, for example, memories relating to your personal life. कि आपने अपने 6th birthday पे, remember the example that we were given before? What did you do on your 6th birthday? Or why was your friend angry with you? Why were you happy the other day? Or why were you upset someday? इन सब चीजों से जो related है वो memories, या फिर why do you share a negative relationship with someone? What kind of events have led you to share a negative relationship with someone? Generally जब हमसे ऐसे कोई questions पूछते हैं that what is your feeling about such a person, we are always like, oh yeah, actually she did this to me, she did that to me, उसने तो मुझे betray किया था. All these things that you are recalling from your mind are part of your episodic memory. So it's probably the one that's used the most. अच्छा, इसमें एक line है that painful and unpleasant experiences which are not remembered in much detail as might be blocked as opposed to pleasant life experiences. It means कि जो memories बहुत ही ज़्यादा unpleasant and negative होती हैं, those memories are often blocked out from our consciousness. ठीक है, तो as opposed to pleasant life experiences, pleasant जो हमारे happy वाले life experiences हैं. You might have अच्छा, in class 12 you will read a chapter about psychological disorders in which there is actually a dissociative disorder which is highly related to blocking out past memories. Okay. Next, we come to semantic memory. As I said, दूसरा part उसका. This memory is related to general awareness and knowledge. All concepts, ideas, rules, and logic are stored in the semantic memory. For example, 6 plus 2 8 होता है, 7 plus 3 10 होता है. Elephant की spelling ELEPHANT ये spelling होती है. This is all part of our semantic memory. Any kind of general knowledge fact. ठीक है? या दिल्ली का पिन कोड 011 है. This is just a general knowledge kind of thing. ठीक है? Whatever you can categorize as decay is part of the semantic memory. Good example given here that you perhaps will not be able to tell when you learned the meaning of non-violence or on which date you came to know that Bangalore is the capital of Calcutta, of Karnataka, right? So you necessarily don't have any kind of ऐसी कोई memory नहीं होती आपकी कि इस दिन मैंने ये fact याद किया था. It is not part of an episode, right? And naturally, since it is not emotionally moving, it is not possible that any kind of semantic memory moves you that in that kind of way. Then इसका मतलब ये है कि it is not susceptible to forgetting. Once you learn it, you will most likely remember it. You will remember that Bangalore is the capital of Karnataka. Okay. So here we finish halfway through the chapter, and next we will move on to the main heading, which is knowledge representations and organization in memory. We're going to discuss knowledge representation and organization in memory. अच्छा, इसमें जो first concept हमारा आता है, that is the concept of concept. So concept क्या होता है? It is a mental category for objects and events which are similar to each other in one or more way. Okay. So this basically हम आपको इसमें क्या बता रहे हैं? Before I get into the concept bit, from now on the chapter will tell you how, since long term memory के पास इतनी सारी चीजें स्टोर करने को, how long term memory sort of effectively manages to store different kinds of information in the correct parts or the correct sections. ठीक है? So the first means by which it is able to do such a thing, it is due to the concept. Because concept क्या होता है? These are mental categories. So आपको दिखा होगा कि I mean, I'll give you an example. For example, you are sitting in a room and it is full of cluster, ठीक है, and you have got to somehow make the sense of the cluster. बहुत सारा pen, pencil, कपड़े, everything is out there. So you have got to make sense of it. What will you do first? First, you will try to make any kind of categories. ठीक है, कि चलो whatever is related to stationery, for example, I will put it in this section. Whatever is related to clothing, I'll put in that section. If it is related to some kind of food, and then or if they are snacks, if they are drinks, then I will put them in one section. So this is exactly what our brain or our mind does. ठीक है, it will start to rearrange information in the form of categories. Okay. Concepts once used, formed, get organized in categories, and category is itself a concept, but it functions to organize similarities among other concepts based on common features. तो category और concept में कुछ खास फर्क नहीं है, but you can understand कि a category is just it's itself a concept, but उसका जो main काम है वो organization of information है on the basis of similarity and differences. Okay, so for example हम mango याद रखते हैं, ठीक है. When you think of mango, you know that what is the category that it comes under? It comes under the concept of fruit, the category of fruit, ठीक है. So then we come to the term called schema. Schema क्या होता है? These are mental frameworks which represent our knowledge and assumptions about the world. For example, एक ड्राइंग रूम का स्कीमा कैसा होगा? कहते हैं ना, व्हाट इज द स्कीम ऑफ अ ड्राइंग रूम? स्कीमा क्या होगा उसका ड्राइंग रूम का? कि देयर इज अ सोफा, देयर इज probably a TV, there is curtains, there is a table, there is a dining table where you can eat, and that kind of thing, and there is mostly it is linked to some kind of entrance. So this is the schema of a drawing room. ठीक है. आपने एक टर्म आई थिंक अभी तक पढ़ी नहीं है. इन द नेक्स्ट चैप्टर थिंकिंग में वी विल रीड अबाउट इट. इट्स कॉल्ड प्रोटोटाइप. प्रोटोटाइप इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम स्कीमा. प्रोटोटाइप में क्या होता है? इट इज द टिपिकल एग्जाम्पल ऑफ समथिंग. फॉर एग्जाम्पल इफ आई से एप्पल, ठीक है, you and think about an apple. So think about an apple means you will think about a red apple, not a green apple, even though green apples exist, right? So prototype होता है typical example of something. Schema is a closely related term, but it is more loosely defined than prototype. So for example, drawing room एक prototypical drawing room भी हो सकता है कि उसमें सोफा हो, ये दोनों terms mix हो सकती हैं, but prototype is more constrictively defined. ठीक है. अच्छा, so अब हम आ जाते हैं next part पे, which is how long-term memory is organized. So, Alan Collins and Ross Quillen published a landmark research paper in which they suggested that knowledge in long-term memory is organized hierarchically and assumes a network structure. ठीक है, elements of this structure are called nodes, and nodes are concepts while connections between these nodes are labeled relationships. This is a very important kind of section. इसमें क्या है? They are sort of telling you कि जैसे कि आप एक फ्लो चार्ट बनाते हो कंप्यूटर पे, in the same way memory is stored. In the same way लॉन्ग टर्म जो हमारी मेमोरी है, द ब्रेन डील्स विद इट. ठीक है, उसमें सर्टेन नोड्स होते हैं. नोड्स क्या होते हैं? इट्स अनदर नेम फॉर कॉन्सेप्ट, और जो उन कॉन्सेप्ट्स को एक दूसरे से रिलेट करते हैं, एरोज आप समझ लो, दोज आर लेबल्ड रिलेशनशिप्स. ठीक है. अच्छा, उस दिन द अदर डे आई वाज watching KBC because it's my favorite show. So someone was asked a question कि जो हमारी ब्रेड, हम when we make bread we use yeast, right? So जो yeast होता है वो किस microbial group का part होता है? And the options were bacteria, the fungi, and I think one of the options was protozoa, and the other, the D was something else. Now why am I bringing this question up? I'll explain it to you with an example. अच्छा, NCERT में there is this example given कि जो हमारे नोड्स और लेबल्ड रिलेशनशिप्स बनते हैं तो वो हमारे कॉन्सेप्ट्स को डिफाइन करने में हेल्प करते हैं. तो फॉर एग्जांपल इसमें कैनरी का एग्जांपल, दैट कैनरी इज अ बर्ड. ठीक है, ये बात हमें पता है. नाउ इफ समवन आस्क्स अस कि इज कैनरी एन एनिमल, वी विल सॉर्ट ऑफ हैव टू मेक एन इनडायरेक्ट लिंक कि हाँ, कैनरी बर्ड तो है. आर ऑल बर्ड्स एनिमल्स? यस, दे आर एनिमल्स. तो यस, कैनरी इज टेक्निकली एन एनिमल. हमने ना ये डिडक्टिव रीजनिंग टाइप का एक प्रोसेस किया. ठीक है. नाउ बिकॉज आवर मेमोरी डज नॉट वांट, हमारी मेमोरी की जो कैपेसिटी है लॉन्ग टर्म मेमोरी की वो काफी है, बट एक लिमिटेशन है उसको लेके. सो यू नो व्हाट इट डज इज कि इट विल रिमेंबर कैनरी यूजिंग अ बर्ड. ठीक है. एंड द सेकंड काइंड ऑफ कॉन्सेप्ट विल बी कि बर्ड इज एन एनिमल. ठीक है. So whenever you are presented with an example of a bird, like a sparrow or a canary, you will always say, oh yeah, that's a bird. But to deduce that it's an animal, you will have to apply some sort of mental effort, because the brain does not have enough information capacity in it to store the information that canary is a bird, sparrow is a bird, so and so is a crow is a bird. ठीक है, all these kind of things. हर bird के लिए animal की category का एक additional column बनाना, इतनी capacity हमारे long term memory में नहीं होती. तो वो bird का column बना लेगा और एक sentence और store कर लेगा that every bird is an animal. ठीक है, so indirectly we have to establish links and retrieve it from the memory. इसी को हम कहते हैं cognitive economy. That means sort of economizing, basically saving space, saving हमारा जो acting economically when it comes to space in the long term memory. Now I'll go back to my example from KBC. So that person was asked this question and he was very confused कि अच्छा yeast क्या होता है, yeast whether it is ये तो उसको पता है कि yeast जो bread में डलता है वो yeast होता है, लेकिन yeast जो होता है वो कौन सी broader category को belong करता है, he was unable to recall. So I think he took the help of a वो क्या कहते हैं उसको, helpline, whatever it's called, lifeline, and then he was told by an expert that it's part of fungi. So this often happens कि हम लोगों को ना एक subordinate category पता चल जाएगी that yes it is yeast that is coming, but from which broader category it is coming we won't know, because the mind has not made that kind of connection. So I hope you were able to understand that. अच्छा, अब इतने देर से we are reading about this. So one thing that is very important, I keep telling you कि cat का जैसे हम example पढ़ रहे थे या apple का पढ़ रहे थे कि cat क्या होता है, it is a furry animal, it has 4 legs, it purrs, and you know how it looks. So as soon as I say cat, एक तो आपको ये सारी properties याद आती हैं उसकी, ठीक है, verbal descriptions of a cat, furry animal, 4-legged mammal, all these kind of things, right? And secondly जो आपको याद आती है वो आपको याद आती है cat की photo in your head. As soon as I say cat, you are imagining a cat. So yeah, we were doing the dual coding hypothesis proposed by Pivio. According to this hypothesis, concrete nouns and information relating to concrete objects are encoded and stored in the form of images, while information related to abstract concepts are stored in the verbal and descriptive manner. Okay? For example, if you think of truth, a picture will not come to your mind. When you think of truth, nouns like honesty, truth, wisdom, all these kind of things will verbally come to your mind. Okay? But if you think of cat के example में a cat will come to your mind visually. ठीक है, you are very very less likely to think कि oh furry animal, 4 legs, ऐसे नहीं सोचेंगे हम. ठीक है, this is called the dual code hypothesis, that there is a dual route by which we remember information of different kinds. ठीक है, abstract information का जो route होता है वो कौन सा route होता है हमारा, verbal route, और जो हमारा concrete objects का route होता है वो होता है visual route. ठीक है, information which has been encoded and stored in the form of images leads to the development of mental models. Okay? For example, cat. There are many routine examples which require mental models. For example, following a road direction, assembling a bicycle, or even preparing to cook an exotic dish from the instructions given in a cookery book. Your gravy should look like this before. जैसे कहते हैं ना कि आपके onions brown हो जाने चाहिए, तो you remember कि ऐसे वाले stage पे onions पहुंच जाने चाहिए before I require to make a mental model of the onions before I actually start cooking a dish using my memory. ठीक है? Now comes the next main heading, which is memory as a constructive process. इसका क्या मतलब है? अब I told you in the previous section of the chapter, I told you कि computer में RAM और hard disk से हम अपनी memory को compare कर सकते हैं. And I told you कि हम इस पे आगे discussion करेंगे कि how it is correct and how it is not correct. Now, when that model was proposed, yes, it was correct कि you can really compare it, with short-term and long-term memory, the way RAM and the way hard disk is there in the computer. But what is the difference between a computer and the human mind? The difference is that अगर आप किसी computer में कोई data feed कर दो, ठीक है, जैसे for example, Mandira was making a lesson at 4 p.m. and it was about memory, it was this and it was that. आपने exact करके type करके अपने word document में save कर दिया. Now you tell it to recall it. So it opens the word document and it shows you the exact replica of the information that you put in. Okay. Whereas in the human mind, ऐसा नहीं होता. Human mind में क्या होता है? You give them a certain sort of information and they will contextualize it, they will understand it, and they will construct around it. Okay, that's why memory is a constructive process. अगर आपको किसी को कोई चीज लॉन्ग टर्म मेमोरी में अच्छे से याद करवानी है, you always ask them कि tell me in your own words कि आपको क्या समझ में आया. it is very rare that when people are recalling any kind of concept, they will recall the concept in the same exact words that you told them. ऐसा नहीं होता. वो उसमें अपनी प्री एग्जिस्टिंग इन्फॉर्मेशन थोड़ी सी ऐड करते हैं, अपना कोई एग्जाम्पल कंस्ट्रक्ट करके बोलते हैं, कुछ करते हैं. सो दैट प्रूव्स टू यू कि ह्यूमन माइंड इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम अ कंप्यूटर बिकॉज it always involves a constructive process. ठीक है. Now let's do an example. Bartlett used the method of serial reproduction in which the participants in his experiments recalled the memory materials repeatedly at varying time intervals. ठीक है. अब अगर वो exact नहीं आया तो he recorded them as errors. Participants altered texts to make them more consistent with their knowledge, glossed over unnecessary details, elaborated the main theme, and transformed the material to more coherent and rational. ठीक है. So, in order to explain such findings, he invoked the term schema, which according to him was क्या? An organization of past experiences and knowledge which influence the way in which incoming information is interpreted, stored, and later retrieved. ठीक है. So whenever you, as I explained to you with using that concept, whenever you tell someone about any kind of concept, he will try to make more sense of it, be more rational about it, be more clear and coherent about it. ऐसे नहीं होता कि आपने किसी को कोई भी concept समझाया, even if it is the first time they are encoding. अब मैं आपको memory वाला chapter पढ़ा रही हूँ, तो एग्जैक्ट सेम वर्ड्स अगर आपको एक्सप्लेन करना होगा किसी को, तो आप यही एग्जैक्ट सेम वर्ड्स यूज करके तो एक्सप्लेन नहीं करोगे. यू विल आप अपने 3 एग्जाम्पल लगाओगे, यू विल सॉर्ट ऑफ एक्सप्लेन इट इन योर ओन अंडरस्टैंडिंग. ठीक है. सो मैं भी अब ये जो वैसे तो बुक में लिखा हुआ है सारा, लेकिन मैं एग्जैक्ट बुक के टर्म्स से थोड़ी ना बता रही हूँ, वरना तो ये टाइप है ही, आप अपने आप पढ़ सकते हो. दैट्स द डिफरेंस बिटवीन ह्यूमन माइंड एंड एनी काइंड ऑफ कंप्यूटर. ठीक है. अच्छा, नेक्स्ट लेट्स कम टू नेचर एंड कॉजेज ऑफ फॉरगेटिंग. सो इसमें ये एबिंगहॉस कर्व जो है दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. इसके अकॉर्डिंग द फर्स्ट 9 hours जो हम फॉरगेटिंग का हमारा होता है कि भूलना कैसे होता है, हाउ टू स्टॉप इट एंड हाउ द प्रोसेस अकर्स. ठीक है. First 9 hours, particularly during the first hour, you are most likely to forget the information. Sorry, the rate of forgetting is maximum. So yes, you will more likely to forget information. After the rate slows down, and not too much is forgotten after many days. Although Ebbinghaus experiments constituted initial explorations, they were not very sophisticated. ठीक है. तो उन्होंने एक experiment किया जिसमें 0 से लेके उन्होंने 100 days तक देखा कि how much retention is there. So if you forget it in the first 9 hours, that is, जहाँ पे risk सबसे ज्यादा है of forgetting it. So that's when you need the most elaborative rehearsal. But after a few days, जो हमारा risk है वो ऐसा कर्व हो जाता है कि first तो बहुत ज्यादा risk है forgetting का, then the risk drops and then becomes constant, more likely to not forget it. ठीक है. Now let us examine some of the theories कि क्यों forgetting होती है. The first theory is due to trace decay. Trace decay मतलब कि हमारे mind में whenever we learn something new, it creates traces in our mind. ठीक है. Now if those traces are not accessed enough, कि अगर हम कोई भी इन्फॉर्मेशन हमने ली एंड आफ्टर, जैसे कि मैंने भी ये मेमोरी वाला चैप्टर कर लिया, ठीक है, नाउ आई हैव डन इट, मुझे एक बार में समझ में आ गया, दैट्स ग्रेट, बट एंड दैट इन्फॉर्मेशन इज एनकोडेड इन माय ब्रेन. बट इफ आई डोंट गो बैक टू इट टू रिहर्स इट, और इफ आई डोंट कनेक्ट इट विद माय डेली लाइफ इनफ, देन lack of use of that information will make me forget it. So this theory basically says that inadequate stimulation, inadequately going back to it, आपने जो उसका trace है उसको बार बार access नहीं किया, इसलिए maybe the information is forgotten. Now this is actually pretty inadequate. ये जो हमारा theory है, it is not that good, because इस हिसाब से तो if I learn something and then I go to sleep, I should completely forget it, right? After 9 hours, मैं 9 hours के लिए सो गई, for example, then I should completely forget it. But studies have proved that if you learn something and you go to sleep, then you are more likely to remember it. So ये तो हमें समझ में नहीं आया. Let's move on to the next theory, which is a better version of this one. So it is the theory of interference. Interference मतलब कि अगर मैंने कोई एक चीज पढ़ी, जैसे मैंने मेमोरी का चैप्टर पढ़ा, ठीक है, और उसके डायरेक्ट बाद जाके मैंने थिंकिंग वाला चैप्टर भी पढ़ लिया. सो हो सकता है कि दोनों की जो इन्फॉर्मेशन है वो आपस में क्लैश हो जाए, इस वजह से मुझे ए और बी दोनों की इन्फॉर्मेशन, यानी कि मेमोरी वाले चैप्टर की और थिंकिंग वाले चैप्टर की, दोनों की ही याद ना रहे. ठीक है. सो इंटरफियरेंस ऑफ अदर इन्फॉर्मेशन कैन ऑफन cause problems and kind of initiate forgetting. So the theory assumes that learning and memorizing involve forming associations between items, and once acquired, these associations remain intact in the memory. ठीक है. So people keep acquiring numerous associations, and each of these rests independently without any mutual conflict. However, if there is a conflict, interference comes about at a time of retrieval when these various sets of associations compete with one another for retrieval. अब मैंने जो एग्जाम्पल दिया था वो मैंने मेमोरी और थिंकिंग का क्यों दिया था, वो मैंने एग्जाम्पल आपको ये मेमोरी वाले चैप्टर का और आपके मैथ्स के फॉर एग्जाम्पल इंटीग्रेशन का क्यों नहीं दिया, वो इसलिए नहीं दिया बिकॉज इंटीग्रेशन जो चैप्टर है हमारा, उसमें जो भी कैलकुलस का चैप्टर है, उसमें जो इन्फॉर्मेशन सेट्स ऑफ आपके प्रोसीजर्स यूज हो रहे हैं, दैट इज नॉट बीइंग यूज्ड व्हाइल यू आर डूइंग मेमोरी, ठीक है। ओनली व्हेन यू रीड साइकोलॉजी का ही एक दूसरा चैप्टर, देन इट क्लैशेस, द इंफॉर्मेशन क्लैशेस, क्योंकि एज आई सेड ना प्रोटोटाइप है, उसमें कई सारे ऐसे कॉन्सेप्ट्स हैं जो इससे ओवरलैपिंग है और दे माइट बी यूज्ड इन अ डिफरेंट कॉन्टेक्स्ट आल्सो, सो यू आर मोर लाइकली टू गेट कंफ्यूज्ड एंड forget things because it will cause a lot of interference in your mind, ठीक है। Now interference can be proactive, which means what you have learned earlier interferes with your recall of the subsequent learning, जैसे कि मैंने आपको अभी एग्जाम्पल दिया था कि earlier you have done memory and it is interfering with thinking. It can also be retroactive, which refers to difficulty in recalling what you have learned earlier because of learning new material, ठीक है। So that is the opposite of proactive. Yeah, okay. So these are the two types of interference. Now the last one is forgetting due to retrieval failure. अच्छा, retrieval failure का मतलब मैंने आपको बताया था कि कोई भी इंफॉर्मेशन को अपनी अवेयरनेस में वापस लाने की ना वजह से, मतलब वी आर अनएबल टू ब्रिंग इट बैक टू आवर अवेयरनेस, दैट्स व्हाई देयर इज मेमोरी फेलियर। इसमें क्या होता है कि इंडिपेंडेंट सेट्स ऑफ stored associations compete or at the time of recall, but also because at the time of recall either retrieval cues are absent or they are inappropriate. For example, इसमें it's a very good example is given. For example, किसी ने आपको ये 5 words याद करने को दिए, hut, wasp, cottage, gold, bronze, ant, right? अगर ये 6 के 6 words आपको याद करने को दिए, मे बी शॉर्ट टर्म मेमोरी के थ्रू आप 1-2 words you will be able to recall immediately after, but if they give you the right kind of cue मतलब hint, ठीक है। अगर आपको करेक्ट टाइप का हिंट दिया जाए, यानी कि इफ दे गिव यू अ हिंट लाइक ओके, सो द कैटेगरी नेम्स हम आपको बता देते हैं, दैट वन इज इट्स द you may recall a lot of them if you provide with the category names, जैसे कि इनमें से एक इंसेक्ट है, इनमें से एक प्लेस ऑफ लिविंग है, इनमें से एक नेम है, एक मेटल है, सो यू जैसे ही मेटल होगा यू विल रिमेंबर दैट इट्स ब्रॉन्ज, इट्स नॉट गोल्ड और एनीथिंग एल्स, ठीक है। गोल्ड भी है मतलब इसमें, बट इट्स नॉट सिल्वर फॉर एग्जाम्पल, ठीक है। सो रिट्रीवल क्यूज अगर हैं तो इट्स ग्रेट फॉर मेमोरी, एंड इफ रिट्रीवल क्यूज आर नॉट देयर और इफ दे आर इनअप्रोप्रिएट, देन इट लीड्स टू रिट्रीवल फेलियर. Now let's come to the final topic of this chapter, which is enhancing memory, which I was saying ki if you stay tuned if you want to enhance your memory. So first of all, the strategies used for enhancing memory are called mnemonics, where the M is silent. So there are some of the techniques that we are going to discuss now. The first one is mnemonics using images. ठीक है? So the first one is the keyword method. So suppose you want to learn foreign words of any kind of language. तो आप उसका क्या करोगे? जो भी इंग्लिश वर्ड्स का उसके साथ साउंड सिमिलर है, आप उसको आइडेंटिफाई करके याद कर लोगे, ठीक है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल इसमें गिवन है, इफ यू वांट टू रिमेंबर द स्पेनिश वर्ड फॉर डक इज pato, you may choose the word pot as the keyword and then evoke images of the keyword and the target word, ठीक है। So this method of learning foreign language is much superior to any kind of rote memorization. Rote memorization मतलब पातो जो रॉकिंग मूवमेंट के साथ आप बार बार एक चीज को रिपीट करके करते हो ना, उससे बहुत बेटर है दैट यू मेक एन एसोसिएशन. पातो मतलब पॉट से थोड़ा सा रिलेटेड लग रहा है तो मैं इसको उससे याद कर लेता हूँ. एनी काइंड ऑफ एसोसिएशन यू आर मेकिंग इन योर हेड, ठीक है. सेकेंड इज मेथड ऑफ लोकाई. मेथड ऑफ लोकाई क्या होता है कि यू वांट टू रिमेंबर द प्लेस एज ऑब्जेक्ट्स अरेंज्ड इन फिजिकल स्पेस इन द फॉर्म ऑफ विजुअल इमेजेस, ठीक है. अच्छा, ये मेथड किस लिए हेल्पफुल है? इन रिमेंबरिंग आइटम्स इन अ सीरियल ऑर्डर, ठीक है. इसमें क्या होता है, यू कैन विजुअलाइज ऑब्जेक्ट्स और प्लेसेस यू नो इन अ गुड सीक्वेंस एंड इमेजिन द ऑब्जेक्ट्स यू वांट टू रिमेंबर एंड एसोसिएट देम विद बाय वन यूजिंग द फिजिकल लोकेशन. अच्छा, इसका एक एग्जांपल करते हैं. ब्रेड, एग, टमाटो एंड सोप आपको लाना है मार्केट जाने से पहले, ठीक है. तो आप ब्रेड को ऐसे याद रखोगे कि किचन में क्या क्या कमी थी. किचन में ब्रेड नहीं था, अंडा नहीं था, ठीक है, ओके, आई गॉट दैट. देन टमाटोज नहीं थे. वेजिटेबल्स में क्या क्या नहीं था? टमाटो नहीं थे, उस वाले वेजिटेबल सेक्शन में. देन यू मूव, बेसिकली यू गो मेंटली टू द बाथरूम. बाथरूम में क्या क्या मिसिंग था? अच्छा, ये यहाँ पर था. ड्राइंग रूम में क्या क्या मिसिंग था? अच्छा, उसके सेल जो थे वो वीक हो रहे थे. तो नाउ यू विल विजुअलाइज ना कि ड्राइंग रूम में एक लैम्प है, लैम्प के सेल वीक हो रहे थे. दैट विल रिमाइंड यू दैट सेल आप उसको खरीदना है आपको जाके, ठीक है. सो दिस काइंड ऑफ मेंटल शॉपिंग दैट यू आर डूइंग इज द मेथड ऑफ लोकाई. फाइनल हेडिंग, mnemonics using organization. Chunking we have discussed before कि जिसमें short term memory को temporarily आप increase कर सकते हो. For example, if you're important, it is important to discover some organization of principles which can link smaller units. वही जो हमने 1949 वाला एग्जाम्पल किया था, सुनामी वाला जो एग्जाम्पल था, दैट्स हाउ यू कैन चंक थिंग्स. The second one is the first letter technique. For example, vigor is a very commonly used term कि violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. आप कोई भी एक first letter use करके word बना सकते हो and you can use that technique to remember anything. ठीक है. Now these processes are good, but they will be आपको अगर long term memory में store करना है और अच्छे से उसको याद करना है तो उसके लिए you will have to do the following things. First of all, engage in deep level processing. Remember we discussed कि उसके associations बनाओ, उसको पहले वाली memory से relate करो. Only then you will be able to recall it perfectly, and only then it can go into your long term memory. Second, you should minimize interference. अगर आज आप memory कर रहे हो, then छुट्टी है आपकी. Don't do any other psychology chapters. In fact, if ऐसे कर लो कि एक eco का कर लिया, एक maths का कर लिया, एक psychology का कर लिया, maths का तो मतलब आता ही होगा. So ऐसे कर करके you can sectionize it and do information that is not interfering with one another at one time. तो आपका अच्छे से long term memory में store हो जाएगा. And give yourself enough retrieval cues. ठीक है. For example, a lot of times we get nervous before going to the exam. हमें क्या होता है कि पूरा हमें ना कुछ भी नहीं आता. We always think that we don't know anything before going into the exam. Now why does that happen? Because we assume कि एग्जाम में क्वेश्चंस भी हमें लिखने हैं और आंसर्स भी हमें लिखने हैं. बट डोंट थिंक लाइक दैट. जब आपको कोई क्वेश्चन पूछेगा then he will give you some kind of cues also, right? Any kind of hint he will give you, and using those hints you will be able to remember all the answers. So don't think like that कि हमें कुछ नहीं आता, because imagining that you have to go and write the questions also along with the answers. Questions are retrieval cues. Take them as retrieval cues and then you can sort of write your answers to them. ठीक है. So PQRST का acronym है preview, question, read, self recite and test. You can of course make sure you do this and remember as much information as possible. So I hope I was able to teach you this memory chapter, and you will remember this chapter because I have engaged the right kind of deep level processing. So if you have any kind of questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section and do subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for listening to me.